नमस्ते। अर्जेन्टिनाको बुइनो एरिस घुम्दाखेरि टुर गाइडले एक्सप्लेन गरिरहेको थियो यो फल्कल्यान्ड वार र माल्भिनाज आइल्यान्डको वारलाई अर्जेन्टिनियनहरूले कसरी हेर्छन् र यो ठाउँमा ब्रिटिसहरूले कसरी आक्रमण गरेका थिए भनेर त्यो भिडियोलाई मैले उनकै मुखबाट उनकै शब्दमा राखिएको छु।
The three islands are known to us as the Malvinas and as the Falklands for the English. This war was fought in 1982 and it lasted for 74 days. But do not be mistaken, it was a war with everything a war implies. We're talking armies, we're talking military prepared ships, we're talking threats of missiles. And sadly, we're talking lots of disease. On the side of Argentina, more than 600 soldiers died. On the side of England, more than 300. So it was a devastating event for both countries. Now, what was the political situation here in Argentina? Well, we were going through our last military dictatorship. Argentina has suffered several military dictatorships during the 20th century, but the last one was probably one of the cruelest ones by far. It's a dictatorship that went from 1976 to 1983. They used to kidnap people from their houses, taking them to illegal detention centers, never to be seen again. It's a very dark, very sinister period of time in which the government was committing all sorts of human rights violations. And even though they had gotten to power with lots of popular support, they quickly lost it because they wanted to sustain it with fear, with what we call terrorism of states, when the state acts as a terrorist to their own population. So by 1982, they needed to create a common enemy that wasn't them. That's why they decided to, through a series of provocations, start a war over the Malvinas Islands, claiming that they would make them part of Argentina once again, that they would reconquer the Malvinas. This war lasted for 74 days before Argentina, of course, surrendered, and nowadays the islands are still part of English territory. Some people ask me about the history behind the islands. What's the deal with the islands themselves? Well, there have been sightings of the Malvinas ever since the late 1500s. The first humans to actually set foot on the islands weren't British. They weren't Spanish. Argentina didn't exist during the late 1500s. They were actually French. Actually, the word Malvinas comes from the French Malvines. Then British soldiers were the second ones to arrive at the islands, and then finally Spanish soldiers as well. But eventually, during the late 1700s, Spanish soldiers decided to assert their dominance over the islands, because before they had absolutely no importance. There are three islands in the middle of nowhere with absolutely no natural resources. So why would you care? Well, you care if you have colonies in South America. If you have colonies in South America, then suddenly the islands become a great place to gather your military and to monitor South America. So the Spanish soldiers decided to take over the islands, kicking both British and French settlements, and claimed that they were now part of the Viceroyalty of the Rio de la Plata. When we declared our revolution and our independence, we said everything that used to be the Viceroyalty of the Rio de la Plata is now part of Argentina. That of course included the islands, and the governor of the islands was given a choice. Do I stick with Spain, continue being a glorified military outpost, or do I go with the revolution and become part of a new nation of America with actual political power? Of course you go with the second one, you want to become part of a new country. So that's when the islands became part of Argentina. We sent people trying to start populating the islands, since before that they were only military settlements. But they were invaded in 1833 by British soldiers. Some of the many British invasions that we received here, they managed to take over the islands. We sent a small army trying to recover them, but they were all repelled and killed. And many people wonder, why didn't we send more armies? Why didn't we send more people if we're so close? Well, because we're fighting a civil war. You cannot fight a war with another country if you're fighting a war with your own fellow countrymen. So Juan Manuel de Rosas, who wasn't president but was president of the Argentinian Confederation, so closest thing it could be to a president of the time, said that we would recover the islands through diplomatic talks. And for 149 years, Argentina and England sat on countless occasions to discuss the subject of the islands, and no negotiations ever got anywhere. Until the conflict erupted, thanks to the military dictatorship here in 1982. Now, what was the side of England on the matter? Well, I'm not an expert in British politics. I'm not going to pretend to be. But I was recently in London and I got the chance to ask many British historians what were their thoughts on the matter. Surprisingly to me, they answered the exact same thing. Margaret Thatcher was in power. And regardless of what you think of Margaret Thatcher, it's true that she did have a political ruthlessness against anything she would consider to be a terrorist attack. And it wasn't hard to consider the dictatorship here a terrorist group. So with that excuse, she launched a counter-offensive almost right away. Actually, the hundred of the names that you see right here on this memorial, which it's obviously put in front of the Tower of the English on purpose. Like, this is not a coincidence, clearly a provocation. 300 of the names that you see here are from soldiers that died in Ara General Belgrano. Ara General Belgrano was one of our ships outside the boundaries of the war that was unjustly attacked by Margaret Thatcher. That's what actually, if you see any United Nations summit, don't. They're super boring. But if you're like me and you see some of them, you'll see that many times Argentinian diplomats push Margaret Thatcher to be considered a war criminal because of this. Nowadays, the islands are still part of British territory, but with some caveats. They are technically part of a decolonization plan made by the United Nations, but they're like super low on the priority list. And also nowadays they're part of another important conflict, which is Argentina's and England's conflict over the South Pole. The United England claims the same part of the South Pole that Argentina claims. Why? Well, because of the Malvinas. They say, hey, we're in the South Atlantic, we deserve that part of the South Pole. So it's kind of a territorial dispute masking another more important territorial dispute. Do you have any questions regarding this subject? On the Argentinian side, some of whom actually feel like good friends, since they were both cheated by the government, used as political pawns in a struggle that was more political than actual territorial. Also, there's no hard feelings against the Brits. Any rivalry that we may have has already been settled. Specifically by Maradona in a football field. The revolution of Argentina, the revolution that ended up leading to our independence. Later we signed our independence, the 9th of July of 1816. So that's what we have two independence days. 25th of May, the day that we start the revolution. But at first we started just like wanting to become more independent here in Buenos Aires and expanded over the territory. Then 9th of July of 1816, that's when we properly said, okay, we have our own flag, we have our own song, we should probably become our own country, right? And that's when Argentina was properly born. But really it's just a formalization of a process that had started 6 years prior. And one of the most important characters in the revolution is, of course, Juan José de San Martín. Juan José de San Martín was given the army of Argentina and went to fight the war to the north until he decided to cross the Andes to liberate the Viceroyalty of Peru, get more viceroyalties involved in the revolution. He did amazing things, crossing the Andes. I'm saying it like that, like, yeah, that's such an easy thing to do. Crossing the Andes is hard nowadays, with freaking airplanes. It's insane, it's ludicrous, it's impossible to cross the Andes on horses at the early 1800s. Actually, it's one of the things that historians cannot completely explain how he did it, which is not that he did it. But today is a holiday, and it's dedicated to another one of the important characters in our revolution. So, would you mind if I, like, switch the top of our flag? San Martín, the big one, the top one, the one that liberated all of what's now Argentina, Chile, and Peru, and took his army all the way up to the equator, and then the man that San Martín left behind to defend Argentina. And that was Güemes. Güemes is defense that you can have. Güemes had participated in the defense of Buenos Aires already during the war against the English when they invaded. Actually, according to like the historic records, it is said that he like took over a ship with a horse. It's like a weird thing, but according to the records, Güemes managed to get his horse on top of a ship. Like an incoming invading ship. I don't know how you do it, being like